Well, everyone, this is our last final panel session for this Metta Convention. So we're going to make this very interactive. If you have any questions, pop it into the chat if you're online. And for those who are here in person, we've got pieces of paper that are coming around for you to write your questions. Okay, Venerables, what a beautiful topic that we have for this last panel session. Can I first invite Brother Tenzin, if you can just share about your experiences and also your thoughts on this topic about the beauty of wandering. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tina and Bhante Joe. Lovely to be here. Yeah, it is a beautiful topic and one that's indeed very close to my heart. And I suppose following on from what Letty was reading from there, just in regards to my background, when I think about the rainforest as being a great teacher of mine, actually in many ways it's because of the invitation that I received in a way in being an ecologist and spending time in wild places in the rainforest, especially in far north Queensland. Particularly during research that I was involved in looking at impact of climate change, we spent a lot of time walking in the forest. And at first this was in a kind of an analytical way, I guess you would say. We were there to try to discover patterns of biodiversity and try to understand how climate change might impact those. But of course, in order to understand, you have to actually go into the forest, and there's many places which are not reachable by vehicle, so this means walking. And you need to walk in silence. I was looking at the birds in particular, and in the forest you often don't see them, you can only hear them. So I was encouraged by that context to spend a lot of time, especially in the early morning, which incidentally is also the recommended, best time for meditation, when the mind is still kind of calm and fresh. Walking in silence, listening intently for the birds, and because it was analytical, though, I was really needing to use a lot of the front brain, trying to catalog, identify, to name and number. And also I was walking a particular distance at a particular time in order, for it to be sort of standardized in a scientific way. But after literally thousands of hours of this, one thing that really kind of struck me was how when I stopped this more analytical approach, when I just opened my ears, opened my heart, as it were, to what the forest was trying to share, and began to walk more, I guess you would say, aimlessly, not so much following a strict pathway or time limit, and even to sit, the forest began to show me things that I had never noticed before. It was as though it really came to life, and there was this possibility of a heart connection when I dropped my presuppositions, my projections on what was going on around me. It was really like one of these insights that comes when we have this beginner's mind, when we don't have a lot of projections, and it stayed with me and guided me eventually to look at other ways to be in the world, other ways to interact. With nature especially, but also with myself and with others. So yeah, it's somehow very closely related to this topic, this invitation to let go, to drop some of our projections and just to listen, to open our heart. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. Thank you, Brother Tenzin. Bhante Joe, do you find that, and feel free to respond to anything that Brother has said, and do you find that perhaps that's also the same with our life as well? So the way that we may wander through our life, the way that we may drop projections in our life, maybe sometimes for some people, someone has asked today, for example, that they don't really know where they're going in their life, that they are a bit aimless and wandering. Any thoughts around that?
Well, basically, to not be aimless, one has to have an aim. So this is the key thing. So even when monks wander, it's not an aimless one. There's a purpose to it, and the higher purpose is the attainment of nibbana. So all the time when monks are wandering, it's actually the larger purpose is to train the mind. So this is always what one is watching. And the aim that overrides training the mind is the achievement of nibbana. So basically, in the way that one wanders through, as a monk, through forests or through villages, always what one is doing is observing one's mind. Are the defilements going up or are they going down? If not, how can I adjust the way that I'm living? How can I adjust the way that I'm wandering? In this way, wandering is not an aimless activity. It's an activity with a purpose, and it's an activity that requires discernment. It's an activity that requires the discernment to know, am I doing this well or am I doing this not well? There are standards to doing this. The monks have the vinaya, right? When we wander, we have to keep it. So that makes it a lot more difficult. Yeah? The monks have interactions with people that they meet on the way. And in interacting with these people, one has to abide by the standards that the Buddha laid down. And then also in wandering, one wanders in solitary places because these places make the mind quiet, as Brother Tenzin had mentioned. And we make the mind quiet so that we can see the way that the mind reacts to things, and so that we can adjust it accordingly, and ultimately so that we can let go of the causes that make us suffer. So for people, you might say, like, wandering through life, just kind of going through life, most important is that they have a goal, right? It's not, life is not an aimless activity. There should be a goal behind it, especially if we're Buddhists. The goal should be nibbana, whether we're monks or lay people. When one is going through life as a lay person, then one wants to evaluate, is the way that I'm wandering through my life something that's leading to the increase of wholesome qualities or the decrease of unwholesome qualities? One wants to evaluate these causes and effects. In wandering through lay life too, there's standards. Lay people have the 5 precepts. They have to keep the 5 precepts. And in interacting with people in one's lay life, also one has the standards laid down by the Buddha. One has to interact with them in the way that he recommended. One wants to interact with them, say, with compassion. Sometimes one wants to interact with them with discernment. One wants to stop people who have bad intentions to one. And all the time, if one is in one's lay life, as well as a monastic life, the causes and conditions that lead to progress in both lay and monastic life are the same. One wants to find places of quiet. When one wanders, eventually one is separating one's mind from the world, whether one's a lay or a monastic. When one looks in the canon, one can see this. Although one will be a lay person wandering through the world, as one progresses, one will become more like oil and water as far as one's mixing with the world. So in this way, one wants to find this place of quiet in lay life as well. And not necessarily just in a metaphorical sense. One wants to be able to spend time alone to meditate, to see these patterns in the mind. What is it that when I do it causes me to suffer? What is it that when I do it causes me to be happy? So that we can put the causes into place to be happy, release the causes that make us suffer, and ideally find this path that leads towards Nibbana.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your sharings, Bhante Joe. So Brother Tenzin, feel free to add or respond to anything that has arisen from what Bhante Joe has said. But picking up on that theme of wandering, but not aimlessly or not without any purpose. So for those who don't know what their purpose is, how can we find what our purpose may be?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and thank you, Bhante Joe, for your sharing. I guess I'm hearing in that question that there is a yearning that a lot of us feel for finding meaning. I think when we talk about having a goal or a purpose, an aim, we're often not so much necessarily needing a destination in mind, as it were, but at least a compass, something that's pointing us in a particular direction, guiding us in what is the next step. I think it's very easy maybe to kind of be overly conditioned or overly influenced perhaps by our conditioning in society and our education, perhaps parental or employment kind of conditioning that's directing us in some way to a destination. We need to have a particular type of job, a particular type of house or car or partner or kind of pay packet, that indicates somehow success. So it's very much kind of directing us towards the destination. And what I hear in Bhante Joe's sharing as well is that actually what we are being asked to consider is where are we putting our feet now? What is our course? And for me, this is the metaphor becomes much more one of a compass, something inside that's pointing us in a particular direction. and that may not be so much about the destination, but actually more about the journey, this journey that we're all on together. And yeah, so I'm hearing that there's this wish that we all share, I think, to have this compass. And for me, this is related to a search for meaning. And I think we can all agree that if we think back over our lives, what we have experienced as meaningful, these are not necessarily the most expensive experiences that we've had. They're not necessarily the most long in duration, but they're the ones that give rise to feeling. The ones that are embedded deeply and that come to mind more freshly are those that have an emotional content. We remember very much in terms of feeling. So time spent with loved ones, or a feeling that we had of being deeply connected to another or to nature, for example, these can have very, very strong meaning. And I think that when we are looking at meaning in the Buddhist tradition, often we are invited to reframe a little bit how we value different feelings. And as Bhante Joe shared, we have, for example, in the monastic context, particular precepts to uphold. But these precepts are there as a framework, the way I interpret and practice with them, a framework to help us to manage relationship in a wholesome way, to help us to interact in a way that give rise to wholesome mental formations, gives rise to connection, and gives rise eventually to awakening. And the most beautiful feeling that we can experience as human beings is love, according to the scriptures. Yeah, this is kind of like the fulfillment of our humanity, is true love, and not a love that is attached either to a particular outcome, a particular destination, or to a particular person or an object, but a love that is shared freely on the understanding that this is actually of mutual benefit both to the giver and to the receiver. And actually, we find in the Dhammapada, for example, there's many references to in chapter 26, I believe, regarding the description of a Brahmin. And in this chapter, it speaks at great length about the qualities of a Brahmin being this coolness, this lack of attachment to worldly things, but also this dimension of homelessness, of being a wanderer. Anoka, actually, is one who has no particular dwelling. But interestingly, we also find in scripture that this quality of Brahma, of nobility, is very strongly related also to love. Loving kindness, of course, familiar to all of you there at the Metta Center, is the first of the Brahma Viharas. So we really find that in inviting one another to go into let's say a non-dwelling, we're actually being also invited to dwell in true love. And I think this sense of true love is one that, for me at least, I find a great source of meaning, and the capacity to cultivate an open heart in relationship, not just to individuals, but also to experiences, is one that gives rise to much more meaning in daily life and in our life in general than perhaps a lot of the other ways that we're conditioned to relate to experience and to others. So yeah, I really think this is a very important question, this search for meaning. But it can begin, I think, in a very basic practice, which is familiar to all of you already at the Metta Center, this kindness towards oneself. What is happening here and now? Where am I in this particular moment? And can I relate to that both inwardly and outwardly with acceptance and friendliness as a starting place to find meaning, to find this compass, this direction that we wish to take the next step, forgetting about next year or 10 years time, even next week. Just what is the next step? What is giving me greater connection, greater opening? So this is what comes to mind from the sharing. Yeah, thanks for the question.
That's beautiful. Would you say that love or kindness could also be a purpose or offer meaning to people?
Well, I think this is the jewel that we can find. Yeah, absolutely. I personally have found that, but yeah, perhaps perhaps others will have a different experience, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that, Bhante Joe.
Yes. So, Bhante Joe, any reflections on this?
Sorry, could you? A lot of topics were covered. Just basically on the searching for a meaning in life. Is that?
Yeah, so earlier you were reflecting on how nibbana could be that purpose. So whilst there may be wandering, but it's not without an aim, and nibbana could be the purpose. And brother was talking about the importance of love, and also love for oneself as well. So we're just exploring about whether, of course, nibbana certainly is an important purpose, but maybe there could be others, love, kindness, depending on where people may be at with their practice?
Yeah, so, well, I think Brother Tenzin made an important point that basically you can't really pre-plan your path to Nibbana. So actually this faculty of wandering, it's not aimless, but there, as he said, I mean, actually, I really like that metaphor of the compass too. And in the Thai forest tradition, this metaphor of the compass is something that's very frequently used. So, I mean, as a Theravada, basically as a Buddhist, our aim is Nibbana. That's the ending of suffering. That's what we're aiming for. But how we get there is going to be different to each individual. So some people, I mean, just in terms of what we might call the way that they direct their minds, they find that by directing their minds primarily to a topic like metta or loving kindness, then their defilements decrease and they really gel with that topic. And this is a way that they relate to the world. Their mind becomes concentrated through this topic. But there are other people, say, the more analytical types, they may not latch on to that topic as well, although it's extremely important for eliminating hatred. The main way that they may relate to the world might be through the perception of impermanence, or it might be through the perception of the loathsomeness of the body. It a lot depends on a person's character. And this inner compass tends to tell us both internally what steps we should take. What's the next step? What topic should I try out here? Is this meditation topic working or not? And externally, is the place that I'm living in good? Is it conducive for my achieving this aim of Nibbana or not? So as Brother Tenzin mentioned, I actually really agree with that approach, or, that approach is generally seen as quite important in the Thai forest tradition. You can't really pre-plan your journey, but it is a compass. Am I pointing in the right direction, and what's the next step? So as far as whether or not one can have like love itself as an aim or whatever it might be as an aim, I have to admit that I've been basically involved. I started out in the Zen tradition, but I've been mainly involved in the Thai forest tradition for quite a long time. So I think that kind of discussion would be like a deeper one to really find out what people mean by true love, or what they mean by these kind of things, and how they see it as a part of their path. And I don't really feel qualified to comment on that in an absolute sense, because I'm not totally familiar with all the contexts in which that word might be used. But just from a Theravada sense, using metta, this may be a topic that's good for some, that they want to take as their main meditation topic. It's an antidote to hatred, so you have to cultivate it to a certain extent to eliminate hatred. And just jumping off what Brother Tenzin said, as far as finding a meaning, finding a way to Nibbana, then it's a step-by-step process, and one needs to have this inner compass.
Thank you, Bhante Joe. That's very helpful. Brother Tenzin, we have a question from the audience. The question is, what about feeling that a bigger purpose may be an attachment? Is Buddhism opposed to chasing our dreams, or is that grasping?
This is also, thanks Bhante Joe, thanks Tina. This is also a very interesting question. I think when we're dealing with questions about attachment, I'm always a fan of going back to the original words in the instructions of the Buddha, rather than trusting necessarily that one word in English is going to be capturing all that was intended. And here, I think we can pretty safely distinguish between craving style attachment, raga or tanha, so a desire for worldly possessions, worldly gain, worldly success, and maybe what we can call aspiration or motivation, chanda, the word in Pali that kind of encapsulates what can be, I suppose, translated maybe as a wholesome desire. For example, a desire for happiness of a more spiritual nature, rather than like a happiness contingent on worldly success. So here, again, this metaphor of the compass may be helpful. I can kind of sense in myself when I...
Oops. Bhante's just frozen. Brother's frozen. We'll just patiently wait. Hopefully he will reconnect soon. Bhante Joe, you still connected with us?
Yes, I'm still here. Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yes, you're fine. So, brother, welcome back. We just lost you for a little bit.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm not sure when it cut out. I did get a warning to say my internet connection was a little bit unstable. I think I was talking about how when we have a distinction between a desire for worldly gain or worldly success and one that is more relating again to this sense of a compass, a direction, an aspiration, here we can start to see that, of course, an aspiration to awaken more fully, to connect more deeply, is a wholesome aspiration and not an attachment that is to be discarded. So this is where we come into the realm of dhammachanda. So the idea of having an aspiration towards the Dhamma, towards awakening. So yeah, absolutely. I think a higher purpose in that way is beneficial, but it's for each of us, I suppose, to look deeply in our lives and to make a note of when our steps towards that goal are giving rise to benefits, and when they might be giving rise to suffering, when we might be finding that we are becoming self-critical or tight around a particular meditation goal or a particular practice, or something coming up in our sangha, for example. Then we can start to see, oh yeah, there's always room for us to turn even the most wholesome aspiration into an obstacle if we're not watchful of our own mind, our own heart. Yeah.
Indeed. Thank you. Now, part of the topic today is my journey, our journey. So, Bhante Joe, could you share some memorable stories that you may have during your travels and your wanderings? And Brother Tenzin, after that, I'll ask you something similar as well. Thank you.
Okay, what kind would you like? Scary, funny?
Well, it's the end of the day. Something funny would be great, but scary would be amazing. And also you mentioned earlier, if it's not too much to ask, you mentioned about wandering in quiet places. So that kind of practice, something that for us, especially city dwellers, we may not necessarily have those same experiences. So we'd love to hear more about those stories and also what that practice means for yourself and those who wish to try it.
Sure. So, well, I guess in terms of a story, there was one time, it was actually during the Corona period, and Sri Lanka being a Buddhist country, you could still go out sometimes during Corona. They would have these lockdowns and it would open up, and lockdowns and it would open up. And, you know, we were stuck in the monastery for about a year. So we decided, okay, now is the time to get out and do some wandering. It opened up for a little bit and we just went out the door to do what they call charika here in Sri Lanka. So we started by wandering over this forested area, this kind of mountain behind the monastery. And when you go through these mountainous forest areas, they're basically dangerous, right? I mean, wild animals live there and you could get killed. So this is, it's a dangerous thing, but it's also something that promotes mindfulness. I mean, you can't just go wherever you want heedlessly, because you could step on a snake. And around the corner, there might be an elephant. If you come face to face with an elephant, there's a considerable chance you could be attacked and possibly killed. So you have to be kind of constantly aware of your surroundings. So being in these dangerous environments promotes mindfulness. Mindfulness in the sense of not letting your mind rush out to think about the past or the future. You have to be there. In another sense, because you're wandering through the forest, you're wandering as a group. If you want to stay safe, you can't be engaged in a lot of loud talking. If you're engaged in a lot of loud talk, sometimes you can. You want to talk loudly if you think that it'll ward off elephants. But elephants are very unpredictable. Sometimes they come towards loud noises rather than running away from them. So generally the recommendation for monks when they go through the forest as a group is they should go in silence. And when you go in silence, when you're walking through the group, you try to set your mind in a similar way as you would any meditation topic. In other words, you set your mind on a destination, and then you keep in mind your meditation topic, whatever it might be, as you're wandering through this forest. So this is some of the ways that you can practice in silence. We came through this kind of dangerous area. It was about 5 hours or something. You have to walk through this forest, and we came out onto this road. And then, you go through these kind of relatively remote villages, and we kept going. Eventually, we ended up at this area called Belihuloya, and above it was this tea plantation. And I was the senior monk there, so I had what you might call the final say on where we were all going. It's kind of there's a seniority system that monks follow, and you usually just go with what the senior monk wants. So there was another monk who was with me, and he decided that he wanted to kind of climb up this unknown mountain path, that we should go up this unknown mountain path into tea country and out of the Buddhist area into the Hindu area and over into this national park. So I didn't want to go because it's very cold up there and I don't like cold, but I decided to go ahead with it anyway. So we set out with myself and these two other monks, and we're climbing up. And we get to this remote village on top of this mountain. And it's a Hindu village, but they still welcomed us and they let us stay in their Hindu temple, which was lovely. And the next day they came with us and offered us rotis. And the manager of that tea plantation, he said, we're going to send you some guys to show you up this mountain path. And by the way, this mountain path was officially closed. I didn't know it until later, but you were supposed to have a permit to go up there. Kind of tourists like to go. So the next day, this fellow who's supposed to guide us shows up, but he showed up drunk. So that should have been a warning sign to me as the senior monk. But I was like, well, what choice do we have? So we kept going on. And at that time, my Sinhalese was not really good. I knew a few phrases to kind of get by, but I couldn't evaluate whether people were plotting against us or not. In any event, we go into this tea country, and both these other monks are like, wait, are we going the right way? I'm like, I don't know. You guys were the ones planning the route. Are we going the right way? So this fellow meets up with another one of his friends in this tea plantation, and they meet up with a third guy. And this third guy had this scowl on his face the whole time. And they ask us, so like, do you know our manager's phone number? We want to ask if this guy can get time off to go with us. And we're like, oh, we don't know his phone number. And again, this should have been a warning sign. So they all three go off with us. And we go off and we start going, and we come to this place where we're going into the forest, and there's this sheer drop off into mist. And there's no path. And it turns out there was just this like 3-foot ledge. And these guys, because they've grown up in the area, they're like you'd say in Sri Lanka, you'd say like monkeys. The monkeys are the most agile animals in the forest. They're walking over these things like it's no problem. But we have large bags, and we could topple off this cliff at any time. So we're crawling along, and out of the bushes right in front of me comes this black snake. And by the way, snakes in Sri Lanka are very dangerous. They're very poisonous. So if you get bitten by a snake, then there's a good chance if you don't get treatment within 45 minutes or so, you could die. So this should have been another warning sign as we're crawling along. But anyways, we passed this ledge, which was very nerve-wracking. And I didn't want to turn back after that because I figured, well, it can't get much worse. In any event, it got much, much worse. Worse and worse. We were going past ledge after ledge, and I had these 2 bags hanging on my side, so I could have toppled and fallen off at any time. And these guys, they were going so fast that they just sometimes disappeared. And we would consult with each other, like, where are we going? Why are they doing this? I can't figure out why they're doing it, but they all have machetes. Because when you go through the jungle, you carry machetes to cut down branches. So we continue on. And you never know what's going to happen. So, well, we'll see what happens. And we're going up steep cliffs that were at an incline like this. And at one time, actually, my feet slipped. And I was hanging onto these roots, just dangling. I had to pull myself up onto this ground. As I flopped onto the ground, I was shaking, like my hands were shaking. It's kind of from physical exertion and also from nervousness. So it keeps going. And I hear this other monk, who was an Australian, by the way, he was trying to catch up with these guys so that they didn't run off on us or something like this. And all of a sudden I hear him screaming like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, up ahead of me. I said, what happened? But it sounded like a happy scream. So as it turns out, we'd gotten to the top of this mountain, and he was screaming because he was so happy we'd finally found civilization. And these guys they're just scooting down the side of this. I've never seen anything like this. I consider myself a pretty athletic fellow, but these villagers, I have nothing, I can't believe the way that they can navigate these mountains. So we get to the top of the mountain, and the first thing we see is this washroom stall with this very big concrete wall and these thick windows to prevent people from falling down the way that we just climbed. And it turned out that we climbed this very famous peak in Sri Lanka called Mini World's End. And Mini World's End is right beside World's End. It's not that mini. It's it's just like a step. It's just a step down. And we're consulting with ourselves, like, why did these guys take us on this route? And later it turned out, we figured out they took us on the route because it was faster for them, and they thought that they could get back down quickly and have like a half day instead of us taking on the normal route. And it turned out that this route that they took us on, this place, World's End in Sri Lanka, is a very famous mountain, and it's where a lot of people go to commit suicide. So these villagers get contracts from the government to go and pick up the dead bodies of people who commit suicide. And they took us on the route that they took to collect the dead bodies
Wow.
to try to save time. So you can only imagine what would have happened if we'd actually died on the route, right? It's kind of a pretty convenient place for them, I guess. So that was the scary one. So we keep going. There was a lot of different adventures. That was just the first week, and the whole thing was about 3 weeks. And we come to the very last part of our journey. So the thing ends, and we had a nice time. I'll skip all the stories in between. But the very last part of our journey, our group decides to separate, and we decide to go our separate ways. The Australian monk wanted to walk a little on the railways, and we wanted to keep going. So we keep going, and myself and another friend, the other monk, we end up at this monastery that was actually originally run by Czech monks. And we're sitting there, we're getting settled in, and who shows up but our Australian friend? He just randomly shows up at that particular. There's so many temples and monasteries in Sri Lanka, by the way. It's like every village has one or two almost. And so he decided to stop coincidentally at the exact same one. So we ended up reuniting this last phase of our trip. Now it was New Year's in Sri Lanka that time. So New Year's in Sri Lanka is the same as New Year's in the West, by the way. People get really drunk. So the next day after reuniting, we decided we were heading out on Pindapat every day. And we headed out on Pindapat, and we meet this guy on almost our very first house. And he's drunk at like 9 a.m. And he's acting really, really aggressive. He's like taking other people's Pindapata food and sticking it in our bowls for us. And he's acting really, really kind of crazy. And, as the senior monk, again, they say in Thai, like sabai, like, okay, it's fine. Anything can happen. This is all right. So later we finished Pindapat. We're like, that was kind of weird that this fellow did this, but whatever. Tomorrow we're all leaving. And by the way, the lockdown had restarted almost at that time. So we had to get back to our monasteries. So the following day we go on Pindapata again, and we come back, and there's this guy with his friend. And he's sitting outside of the sala, and he's like glaring at me. And I'm thinking, well, what's he glaring for? That's fine. And, we were going around, they're like, these fellas, they want you to come to Dana. And I'm like, they want us to come to Dana? Well, we can't. We're leaving today. So then, that was when I came out, and I see this guy standing at the sala. He's like glaring at me. He's like, like a thug. He was drunk again at 9 a.m. He's like, so you're coming to Dana? Like glaring at me and trying to intimidate me into coming to Dana. So coming from Canada or the United States, this is something really funny because, if people intimidate you and want to, browbeat you, it's usually to get your money. It's not to invite you to Dana. So in any event, we told this guy, no, we can't come to Dana. He gets more and more belligerent. And another monk I was with was a Sinhalese monk. And I'm like, well, let's just go. I mean, what's the worst that they could happen? They want to offer us Dana. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if they put a gun to my head, then I'll accept Dana, no problem. So this fellow gets more and more belligerent. He's getting more and more angry. And I've never seen anybody get so belligerent to offer Dana. So we decide we're going to sneak out and kind of escape this guy to avoid this forcible Dana. And as we leave, there's the guy waiting for us in the field. As we leave to kind of, I guess I think that was what we were thinking, to sneak out, basically to try to not catch him. And he knew the exit we were going to take. So he's waiting there to try to force us to come to Dana. So as he's there, he's trying all these different things. He's trying to convince us, like, you've got to come to Dana. You've got to come to Dana. He tried from browbeating, almost looking like he was crying. And then we finally get to the car. He's still following us across this highway all the way up to the car. And so finally, I'm like, look, I said to him as the senior monk, then he became a little stern on the way. I'm like, look, I know you're your village elder, but we've got to go. You can't force us to ask to come into dana. So as we're about to get into the car, he falls on the ground, like he fell over and like looking very dramatic. And he says something in Sinhalese to the Sinhalese monk. And I'm like, what did he say? And we get in the car and leave. I'm like, what did he say? He's like, I'll tell you later. And so finally, we get to some place or something, and I'm like, what did this guy say? And he said, that's it. From this day forward, I'm not a Buddhist. I'm a Christian. So our refusal to go to dana forced this guy to want to convert to Christianity, but he was drunk both times. So as it turns out, in Sri Lanka, dana is a very big part of their culture. And this was a time when I was relatively new to Sri Lanka. And this guy he would have lost a lot of status by telling his whole village that we were coming to dana and then us not showing up. And he's like this thug. But in any event, I'm used to worse thugs in Canada and the United States than that. So being forcibly abducted to go to dana wasn't a big worry, but it turned out to be something really funny. That was a funny end to the charika. So that's a scary story and a funny one.
That's great. Thank you so much, Bhante. And as an aside, Metta Centre is organising a pilgrimage to Thailand this year, and we're hoping to organise a pilgrimage to Sri Lanka next year. So if you're still around, we'd love to see you there. Maybe we'll skip the mini World's End and the World's End place. Thank you. Brother Tenzin, we would love to hear from you, any stories you want to share about your wandering, and also about this topic, my journey, our journey. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina. Thanks, Bhante Joe. Yeah, I guess what comes to mind for me, speaking of pilgrimages, the context in which I think I've had some of my most memorable, moving experiences of wandering has actually been in the context of pilgrimage. And while for me as a personal practice, that's something that really began in the Himalayas, especially in Nepal, but also in India. Actually, more recently, I've been really honored, had really the good fortune to connect with a group in Australia, which also is involved in organizing pilgrimage right there in Australia. And of course, the word yatra, it's yatra.org.au, is that organization is one that in Sanskrit refers to this concept of a journey which has a sacred purpose, one that is not just for getting to a particular destination in the worldly sense, but one in which every step is possibly transformative. If we're able to bring right attitude and right mindfulness to each of our steps in that journey, it can be incredibly transformative. So yeah, it's really a beautiful practice, and one that actually, speaking of journeys with inner purpose, is inspired by quite an extraordinary venerable monk from Cambodia by the name of Mahaghosananda, or great blissful or joyful proclaimer. And in 1992, he organized what became one of many Dhamma yatras in Cambodia, actually bringing refugees from camps on the Thai border into the recently opened up Cambodia under the UN peace plan there, actually accompanying with a group of about 300 monks and nuns, accompanying refugees who had been exiled from their homelands through mine-strewn jungles and very difficult conditions back to their villages, in a way kind of coming home for them. But as a wandering monk, gone into homelessness, it was really a sense of actually home being the idea that peace was still possible, even after all of that trauma of the conflict in Cambodia. It was possible through mindfully walking to actually generate peace again, peace in the heart of those individuals. And actually it became very widely known. This practice got a lot of media attention and actually has been continuing since then. and has inspired others around the world, including this organization that I work together with in Australia. And of course, we don't have to deal with minefields, but the minefield, of course, that we are dealing with is the one that lies in our own heart. And in a way, what we do when we come together to walk on country in Australia, we as well as connecting to that place, to these spectacular wild places, we also connect to ourselves and we connect to one another. We're kind of exposing ourselves, as Bhante Joe shared, to all kinds of different natural phenomena, wild animals, the weather, external weather, of course, storms can come, but also we have inner storms, things that can make it difficult to deal with a small group of people moving from place to place, day to day. Lots of things come up. So it's a really amazing practice for us to show what are our knots, the things that we still need to work with, but at the same time coming back to a connection with nature. And in that context, you almost don't need to say anything. The Dharma is there in front of your eyes, in the waves on the ocean, the clouds in the sky, in just the simple act of sitting, enjoying a meal in nature, under the stars, sitting around a fire. There is so much there, so much richness. And yeah, we find a lot of meaning. And one of my most memorable yatras was actually to a stretch of coastline, very beautiful coastline, just north of Bellingen or Coffs Harbour on the mid-north coast of New South Wales, where we're actually going to be running another event in mid-October, just coming up. And this really precious little stretch of coastline that we walk over about 10 days from Yaegl country on to the country to the south near Red Rock. And beautiful beaches, and in the season when the whales are moving, we can often see whales jumping out beyond the surf when we stop on the headlands. But one of the most memorable things about the last time we walked there was just a very, very simple process that we went through right at the beginning, where we invited one of the elders from Yaegl country to come to meet us, where we were sitting around the fire before heading off on our walk. And she offered us a welcome to country, which very, very simple process. She just spoke a little bit about her connection to that place, those ancestral lands. But what really touched me and what touched everyone in the group, so much so that they were still talking about it 10 days later when we walked back out into civilization, as it were. She just said how important it was for her to know that we were there walking on country in mindfulness, with a sense of open-hearted awareness for what was arising for that country itself, for those wild places, but also for one another. And actually, she was moved to tears by that, as many were in the group, because this, for her, was what country needed. It needed people to be walking in awareness and in love and kindness to that country and to one another, in order to heal some of the suffering that was still very present in her community, and as a result of her inherited, I guess you would say, suffering from many, many years of the impact of colonization on her community there. So yeah, we walked together with that in mind. And as I mentioned, it was still something very fresh in people's hearts when we came to the end of that journey. Just that simple act of walking in awareness with an open heart, open mind, as being so capable of healing ourselves within, but also healing connection to country and healing connection within the community. So yeah, I think this is, for me, that stands out as a very kind of transformative experience of wandering, but wandering again not with the goal in mind, but with the destination being every step, and how I'm placing my feet on this earth, how I'm connecting from the heart to country, to myself, and also to community, to people around. So yeah, thanks so much for listening. That's probably all I'll say for now. But yeah, once again, thanks so much for the opportunity to share around this very important topic. And yeah, back over to you, Tina.
Thank you so much, brother. What a beautiful sharing and also beautiful practice as well. So I've placed in the chat the website for Yatra, and I've also, and if you're watching this on YouTube later, we will also put it into the description below, along with other resources that have been mentioned during this convention. So we have time for one last question from the audience. The question is, how do we love family members without being attached and deep sadness when they are gone? How is that possible, if at all possible? So perhaps if I start with Bhante Joe and then Brother Tenzin, if you have anything to add after that.
Well, it's basically one of the, it's like having the head and the tail of a snake. And so there's actually a sutta where the Buddha says that those who are dear bring sorrow, pain, lamentation, grief, and despair. And there's this group of gamblers who disagrees with the Buddha. And the conversation gets all the way over to the palace. And then King Pasenadi says to Queen Malika, look, your Buddha is saying that family members bring sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. And then Queen Malika says to King Pasenadi, well, think about it. Basically just paraphrasing here. If there were change and alteration in me, would you suffer? And he says, yes, I would suffer. As a result, my life would be changed. And she goes down this list of family members and asks if there was change and alteration in them, if the king would suffer. And for each one, the king says, yes, I would suffer. And she says, it's in this way that the Buddha says that basically family members, those who are dear, bring sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. So then the king gains a lot of faith in the Buddha. And this is actually how King Pasenadi became a disciple of the Buddha. So in essence, at the time, when we're with our family members, when we're delighting in them, when we're completely in love with them, when we're swept away by them, this is what in Pali is called upadana. And upadana, following on that, is becoming. And we become somebody based on that. And then if we lose our family members, we suffer because of it. So if we don't want to suffer because of loss of our family members, then we have to relate to them through the Dhamma and without attachment. In other words, the Buddha has laid down various responsibilities and duties between, say, like mother and children and parents. One fulfills these duties with the Dhamma in mind, not with one's attachment or love to these people in mind. So it's like the practice of metta. Spreading metta, it doesn't necessarily mean like you fall in love with everybody. There's actually a spreading of metta where we spread metta to snakes and wish they all go away. What it means is you have this attitude of goodwill towards your family members. May you be well, may you be happy. But we don't let our mind tip over. It's said to be, pema or love is said to be the near enemy of metta. We don't let our mind tip over into this situation where we're swept away in love for our family members, for our children, for our parents, because there's no escaping the pain that comes when this love is destroyed. And there's no escaping it being lost. It will be lost when they die. So metta towards our family members is an antidote to the suffering that comes from pema or love. We relate to our family members through the means that the Buddha recommended in the suttas. We relate to our mother and father through that means. And we relate to them through the purposes of the Dhamma. When the Dhamma becomes primary, then our attachment to them doesn't become primary. And then when we lose them, we don't have to suffer. But we still relate to them well.
Thank you, Bhante.
So that's all.
Thank you. Excellent sharing. Thank you so much. Brother Tenzin, anything you would like to add to that?
Hi, thanks, Tina. I'm going to have to apologize, actually, perhaps also fitting with the topic. I actually need to wander myself down to the airport to catch my flight to Delhi. But I guess I would say that there's a lot of room for a healthy dose of common sense there. And as human beings born very vulnerable, we actually need attachment to survive. We need attachment from our mother and father in order to support us in the growth of a healthy body and a healthy mind, a healthy individuation relies on a certain degree of attachment. What we can really be aware of, I suppose, though, as Bhante Joe has shared, is when that attachment actually gives rise to suffering, it's no longer supporting. And the metaphors offered in the practice of the Brahmavihara of loving kindness of a mother, one who at the beginning loves her only child and would defend it even at her own life's risk, because it is vulnerable. An infant is vulnerable and needs that enveloping care. She can respond with compassion when a child is hurt, feeling that suffering and wishing to relieve it. She can be joyful when that child begins to take its first steps out into the world, having success in education, for example, sharing in that joy without being wishing to deprive, of course, the child of that joy and have it for herself, have that success for herself. And when it's time for the child to leave home, when the child is grown, how can she relate to that experience? But with equanimity, knowing that she's done her best. There is certain causes and conditions now which may arise, over which she has no control, and she needs to practice with equanimity. There is a letting go, even in the midst of that love and care. There is a letting go in order for that child to go out into the world and to be healthy and strong. She also needs to know when to practice detachment. So I think there's a time and a place, and we can use common sense to know, of course, when an infant needs our care, we can practice with an enveloping and nurturing care, and there is attachment in that. As a lay person, this goes without saying, and we can just use common sense, I feel, to know when it's causing us more grief than joy. This is a sign that maybe we are spilling over, as Bhante Joe shared, more into an attachment when actually there is a letting go that may be more helpful. If you love someone, let them free, huh?
Thank you so much, brother. And if you need to go, we will also let you be free. We do not want you to miss your flight either.
Thanks so much. I wish I could stay and enjoy for longer, but I really do need to go. Thanks.
Indeed. Thank you for your time. Okay. Amazing.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And if I may just end with a very short story from the work that we've been doing at the university. We've been running regular sessions at the university, including meditation classes. And one day, one of the students wandered into the room, and she told us afterwards that she wandered in not knowing what it was, because she was just bored of studying, really. And so she wandered in, a bit curious, and since then she's actually stayed. So she's been coming regularly to the meditation classes. So perhaps one of the other beauties of wandering is, if we wander with that openness and without expectations, we don't know where it will lead us and what incredible opportunities perhaps is waiting for us. So friends, my journey, our journey, you may have come as an individual in your journey, but I hope collectively we have, through the Metta Convention, been able to take this journey together, whether in person or online. I really wish that this Metta Convention has been one that now is our shared journey. So thank you again so much to Bhante Joe and also to Brother Tenzin. We will now finish off the session, and I will now hand over back to the MCs.